Welcome back to Ben Franklin High School SWENext Summer Challenges. SWENext is a club that strives to inspire young girls in our community with STEM. Due to COVID-19, we've decided to continue our outreach events online. STEM professionals are often tasked with using their problem-solving skills to solve real-world problems. Today, we are going to delve into the problems associated with flooding and solutions for helping communities survive them.
Flooding, especially that associated with hurricanes, has long posed a danger to New Orleans, which is located along the Mississippi River. As a colonial settlement, the French and Spanish avoided low-lying ground in an effort to protect houses and other buildings from floods. For example, the historical Esplanade Ridge, a site of trade between the French and Native Americans, was known for its high elevation, and thus many of New Orleans' oldest buildings are located here today. This area was also lucky not to flood during Hurricane Katrina, 2005. However, the threat of floods is not unique to New Orleans. Flood protective structures have been used throughout history, especially in the Netherlands, where swamps were drained and taken over by people. This low-lying land was protected through the use of dikes, essentially levees, which served as barriers to invading waters. Thus, the engineering behind floodproofing is extremely valuable in protecting communities. The dangers presented by flooding are now more prevalent than ever due to environmental issues. Coastal erosion, rising sea levels, and other consequences of global warming continue to make the inland more susceptible to bigger and more frequent floods. New Orleans is especially vulnerable to coastal erosion and rising sea levels due to its low elevation, making engineering and innovative flood protective structures all the more important. Global warming has a grim future in store for NOLA, with predictions that it will be underwater in 50 to 100 years. Therefore, the innovative minds and engineering of the next generation will be crucial in saving low-lying coastal lands across the world from submersion.
For centuries, Louisianians have adapted their houses to better withstand the frequent flooding of this environment by floodproofing. Floodproofing is any measure intended to prevent the damaging effects of flooding to a building. When floodproofing a house, many factors are taken into consideration, from emergency measures in anticipation of a flood, such as sandbagging or blocking openings, to analyzing the best structural measures. There are several ways that people floodproof their houses, and you can use any of them in your project. Today, however, we are going over three main ways houses are floodproof. That is, floating houses, stilted houses, and floodwall houses. Floating houses use the properties of density to rise with the water to prevent flooding. Stilted houses use stilts, or stacked pilings, to not only lift the house far above any floodwaters, but also use the properties of friction to reduce the chance of flooding. Floodwall houses use an alternative approach and take advantage of net force and certain materials to reinforce the walls of the house so that no floodwater gets in. But what is density? What about friction? Net force? And how are these materials chosen? Well,
density is defined as the amount of mass per unit volume of a substance. The formula is density equals mass divided by volume. In order for a substance to float or lie on the surface of another substance, it must have a lower density than the lower layer. For instance, oil separates to form a layer above water when together because of its lower density, approximately 0.91 grams per centimeter cubed versus water's density of 1.00 grams per centimeter cubed. Therefore, when working with the floating house method, one must ensure the density of the materials and the construction of the house allows it to float above water. Friction is the resistance one surface or object encounters when moving against another. In an elevated house, pilings support the residents through skin friction, resulting from the resistance of the soil or sand to downward pressure by the pilings. The raised house allows floodwaters to pass freely underneath the house without damaging the stilt structures or the building.
floodwall houses primarily use the concept of net force to keep the house from being flooded. A force is an interaction that will change the motion of an object. The net force is the sum of all of the forces acting on an object. The net force determines how much an object will change its motion. In this instance, there are two major forces: the force of the water pushing on the house, and the force of the house pushing on the water. If the force of the water pushing on the house is greater than the force exerted by the house, then the house will be flooded. We want to prevent the house from being flooded, so we need to make sure that the force of the house is greater than that of the water. How can we make sure of that? By carefully choosing our materials. The materials you construct your house with will have great effect on the chance of your house being flooded. When building, you of course want a strong material that will enable your structure to be sound. But you also want a material that will not fail as a barrier when it is submerged in water. Logically, you wouldn't use paper to build a house. It is a very weak material and it easily breaks apart in water. What about wood? It's strong, so it would be a good foundation. However, wood, like many natural substances, is porous. Porous materials have tiny spaces or holes that enable liquids such as floodwater to easily pass through. What about glass? Glass is very non-porous. However, it is very fragile and dangerous. If you are building a floodwall house, being picky about what you build your house with is essential. However, the importance of the porousness of materials might not be as important as the weight if you are trying to make a stilted house, or its density if you are trying to make a floating house. Keep in mind that just like the real world, everything is a balance between the factors that you deem most important for your house specifically.
For our requirements, your house is required to have 4 walls and a floor. You must also draw up a blueprint of your house and submit a photo of it. We expect you to be creative with your house's design and add details that make it more unique. If you want to go a step further, you can try the bonus, extra points, by adding a roof or multiple stories to your humble abode. Remember, just like every other part of this project, you must determine how to make the multiple stories stable and assess the risks associated with multiple stories and a roof. If your house floats without multiple floors or a roof, then do not sacrifice the functionality of your floating house for bonus points.
To see the official scoring rubric, visit our website linked in the description.
For this project, you'll be getting 2 weeks. The project is due on Friday, July 24th at 11:59 Central, and the winner will be announced on Sunday, July 26th. And remember, the winner will also receive a STEM prize. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at husey22@bfhsla.org.
Good luck, young construction engineers!